Because of the economic downfall, many of you have probably begun to wonder what would happen if you were to become financially devastated. There are several options available, one of these major options being the filing of a Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a legal proceeding that relieves the debtor of all financial burden. Today we'll discuss the differences between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 bankruptcies. I found that many people are interested in knowing more about Chapter 7 or 13 bankruptcies, but because of the nature of the topic, they're embarrassed and refrain from asking any questions. Chapter 7 bankruptcy. As Moss stated in the American Bankruptcy Institute Journal, the goal of a bankruptcy proceeding is to obtain a discharge of debts. When a debt is discharged, it is no longer enforceable against the debtor personally. Basically what this means is once you file a bankruptcy and your debts are discharged, they're wiped out. You're no longer responsible for them. Upon filing a bankruptcy, you receive protection from the federal court. Again, this prevents stops the harassing phone calls from creditors, any type of foreclosure, garnishment, lawsuit, and it's imposed by the government to help you be able to get your life under control while protecting your assets. From the time a bankruptcy is filed, it is generally 4 to 6 months before you receive a discharge. Again, we know that a discharge means that all of your debt has been wiped out and you're no longer responsible for it. Some of the disadvantages of filing Chapter 7 or Chapter 7 bankruptcy is it is harder to qualify. The reason it's harder to qualify is because you're required to pass what is called a means test. A means test is used by the courts to determine the eligibility of your eligibility to file a Chapter 7. We won't go into details about what you need to qualify or what you need to do in order to qualify in a means test because it is quite complex and can be very tricky. You should know before you file a bankruptcy, however, if you do or do not qualify. Liquidation of assets. Chapter 7 bankruptcy is commonly referred to as a liquidation bankruptcy. The reason for this is in some cases your assets will be sold by the government to pay off your debt. This is not the case for all Chapter 7 bankruptcies, but it can be detrimental if you are trying to file and find out at a later date that you are no longer able to keep your house or your car or any of the assets that you wish to keep. If some of you are wondering, what happens if I can't file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Am I no longer protected? Is there any other options? We've just touched on one of the first bankruptcies. There's also Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Some of the advantages of Chapter 13 bankruptcy, like a Chapter 7, is that you are protected from foreclosures, lawsuits, garnishments, repossessions. The only difference is in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, in order to protect your house from being foreclosed on or to prevent your car from being repossessed, you have to pay through a monthly payment plan that consists of 3 to 5 years of monthly payments to the Chapter 13 trustee. For 3 to 5 years, when you file, you send a monthly payment to the court that consists of your secured assets such as your car, your mortgage, your attorney's fees, and any arrears that you have on those cars or those homes. That payment brings you current within the 3 to 5 years and allows you to receive a discharge of all other unsecured debts. However, a portion of that money may go towards some of your unsecured debts, such as credit cards and medical bills, and in some instances you will be required to pay back 100% of your debt, secured and unsecured. As Moss stated in the American Institute Journal, a Chapter 13 can save you from repossession or foreclosure. That is the best thing to remember when determining whether or not you choose to file a 13 or a 7. A 13 will always save your home from going into foreclosure and will always prevent your car from being repossessed. You will have to pay for them, but it can stop the foreclosure proceeding at the time of filing. Some of the disadvantages of filing a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is that as opposed to the 4 to 6 months it takes to discharge a Chapter 7, a Chapter 13 can last from 3 to 5 years before a discharge is received. You do end up paying some of your debt back, and in some cases, as we stated earlier, 100% of your debt. All assets are part of the bankruptcy estate while you are in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. What this means is if you own a vehicle outright and you're in a bind and you need to sell it for some extra cash, that car is not yours while you're in a bankruptcy. It is part of the bankruptcy estate. So if you sell it, not only do you have to seek approval, you have to turn the funds over to the government, which goes to pay for some of your debt. In consumer bankruptcy, Warder states a bankruptcy can make it a hassle to obtain financing for the 3 to 5 years. The reason again is the government will not discharge your debt while allowing you to incur other debt. So they want to basically look over the information, make sure it's necessary and it's something that you genuinely need before they allow you to seek any type of financing. Maybe a home or a vehicle are the only exceptions when it comes to financing. Now that we're a little more educated on both, we'll move on to one of the most common questions of bankruptcy. The first question that comes out of everybody's mouth is, how does it affect my credit? A Chapter 13 bankruptcy can remain on your credit report for up to 7 years for Chapter 13. In a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, it will remain on your credit report for up to 10 years. One question to ask yourself when filing bankruptcy, if you are trying to decide whether or not to file because you're afraid perhaps that your credit will be harmed, is if you chose not to file, would delinquent payments or foreclosure or repossession look better on your credit report than wiping that all out and giving yourself a fresh start with the bankruptcy? It's not as hard to rebuild credit as it once was. When you file bankruptcy, sometimes creditors look at it as you are less of a liability. You filed, there are laws in place to prevent you from filing for several years, and your liability is less. So you may have had vehicles and credit cards and have stretched yourself thin with payments in the past, but once you filed, you no longer have these burdensome debts and you are able to make a mortgage payment or a car note easily. Bankruptcy is not always the alternative and should be taken seriously. There is help out there and we should be educated on our options. We've discussed the advantages and disadvantages of filing bankruptcy. In a 7, it's shorter, 4 to 6 months, whereas a 13, it's 3 to 5 years. In a Chapter 7, your assets may be liquidated. In a Chapter 13, your house can be prevented from going into foreclosure and your car can be prevented from being repossessed. In a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, it is a payment plan. You do pay back some of your unsecured debt, whereas in a Chapter 7, those debts are all wiped out, but you do have to qualify by passing the means test. The more knowledge that we know can make us make more informed decisions, and we should not look at bankruptcy as an easy way out. It's simply an option and should not be relied on. Financial responsibility is necessary in everybody's life, not only to keep us sane, but to help protect and ensure the well-being of our loved ones as well as ourselves. And here's my audience. Say hi, guys.